What's happening? A good Thursday to all of you. Thanks for joining me as always. It is much appreciated. Coming up, we'll tell you why Robert Kraft will be forced, and yes, I said forced, to spend this off season. Good news for Patriots fans who might be concerned about that. But we start with the current QB1. We have some eye-opening numbers that you do not want to miss. Numbers that you are going to get on this podcast that you will get nowhere else today. I promise you that. This is not going to be a Mac Jones versus Bailey Zappe conversation. Mac Jones is broken. He's benched. He's old news right now. So this is not Mac versus Zappe. This is just looking at Bailey Zappe and trying to figure out whether or not he is a true QB1, somebody the Patriots can depend upon in the future, somebody you look at in 2024 and say, that's our starting quarterback. That's what we're talking about. To start off, anything is possible. Kevin Garnett told us that years ago. And I think when you look at quarterbacks around the league, there is no true defined guaranteed way of finding that guy. There's just not. Yes, you can draft that guy at the top of the draft like Joe Burrow. You can move up to draft somebody like Patrick Mahomes. You can go out and find somebody in the middle rounds like Dak Prescott. You can even make Mr. Irrelevant a starting quarterback in the league. Latest example, as we've seen, Brock Purdy. So there is no true and tried way of finding that guy. And I'm not going to write off anybody. I don't believe in writing off anybody. I love underdog stories and Cinderella stories. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that there is no way on God's green earth that Bailey Zappe is not going to be a starting quarterback. I'm not going to tell you that. I keep it open, at least for now. It's an inexact science of evaluation. We've seen that time and time and time again. Now, before I get into the numbers that you don't want to miss, because I did some work in the lab last night, here are the pros that we've seen from Zappe. Let's be fair to Zappe and give you the pros. He has improved versus pressure steadily. Under pressure versus Denver, according to Pat's Pulpit's Bernd Buckmasser, Zappe went 9 of 13 for 115 yards and a touchdown. And if you look at his numbers against pressure, he has done better each and every week he's been out there. So I give him credit for that. He has shown tremendous poise a number of times since he's been starting for the Patriots. He hasn't been shook as often as Mac was. He looks like a guy who's under control for the most part. So that's been good. He is more prone, absolutely, to make plays off platform, manipulate the pocket, extend plays. We saw it with the Gesicki touchdown. We saw it with the Pop Douglas play on Christmas Eve night. So he has shown the ability to do that. And of course, he's won. Bailey Zappe as a starting quarterback is 4-2 with the Patriots. But I am not there yet with Zappe. And I am not close to being there yet with Zappe. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Bailey Zappe is QB1. I'm not telling you he's QB1 2 weeks from now. I'm not telling you he's QB1 2 months from now. I'm not telling you he's QB1 2 years from now. I'm not there yet. The ebbs and the flows are a real thing. Starting quarterbacks do not go up and down dramatically like we've seen Zappe do. First half against Denver was okay. It was good. It was fine. Greg Bedard says he doesn't think it was even that good. Second half was excellent. This is the trend with Zappe. He's had one okay half or good half or even very good half, and then he'll have another half that is a disaster. And when you have a starting quarterback, a guy that you are truly going to sit there and say, that's our franchise, you need consistency. You need someone who's not going to completely fall off a cliff in the second half of a football game. You don't need somebody who's going to throw that pick against Kansas City straight out of the locker room at halftime. You don't need that guy, right? So you need consistency if you're going to believe that any quarterback at the NFL level is going to be a true starting quarterback. Context also matters. Let's get into the context. Let's get into the numbers. These are numbers you're not going to get anywhere else today but right here. When we talk about Boston sports talk done different, it's not just a tagline. This is the meaning of it. We will give you more context. We'll give you more to think about. So here's what I have for you regarding Bailey Zappe. If you look at the drives from Zappe as QB1, and this is not counting the end of half drives or the end of game drives that had 4 downs or less, because let's be honest, those things don't really matter. You take a knee at the end of a half, you hand the football off at the end of a half, it's the end of the game, you're in desperation mode, you get 2 downs, nothing happens. I'm not counting those. So QB1 drives for Zappe, not counting end of halves or end of game drives with, 4 downs or less. Zappe's had 48 drives as QB1. 48 drives. How many of those? Comment to me right now. I'm going to play a game with all of you. How many of the 48 drives that Bailey Zappe has led as QB1 since he took over? We're not looking at when he came in the middle of a game. We're not looking at the Germany game when he came in late. How many of the 48 drives that Zappe has led as true QB1 have gone 3 and out? How many of those 48 drives do you think? Meanwhile, Mike Pyle asks us, don't forget to comment, do you think they will go after Russell Wilson? I do not think so. Now, he could be a bridge. He could be a competition quarterback, but he's going to be looking for money. I don't think the Patriots will pay Russell Wilson what he wants to, be a mediocre QB. Ike Ikerson jumps in, says, hey, just stopped in, a thumbs up. We'll listen later. I appreciate that. That's always an option for you if you can't watch this entire show live. You could just pop in and say something, give us a thumbs up and move on and catch it later on in the day. And don't forget to give us those likes because they mean the world to us. More likes means more thumbs. I will get to the numbers in a minute. I promise you. More likes, comments, subscriptions. Let's bump those subscriptions up as we try to build this community. Okay, so how many of the 48 drives that Bailey Zappe has led have ended in a 3 and out? Doug jumps in, and Doug guesses 27. Doug, you're a little bit too high. 21 of the 48 drives that Zappe has had as QB1 with this football team have ended with a 3 and out. That's 43.7% of the drives. Almost 44% of all the drives that Zappe has led since he took over for Mac Jones have ended in a 3 and out. Now, when you look at the drives that ended in a turnover, or how about drives that, was a turnover on downs, a 4 and out, so to speak. Zappe has had 5 drives end in a turnover or a turnover on downs. So when you look at the big picture here, Bailey Zappe as quarterback 1 has had 48 drives for the Patriots since he took over for Mac. On 26 of those drives, he has ended up finishing with a 3 and out, a turnover, or a turnover on downs 26 times. What that means is 54% of the time when Zappe's on the field, you are going to have a 3 and out, a turnover, or a turnover on downs. That's not good. More than 50% of the time, your drive is going to stink with Bailey Zappe as your starting quarterback. That's what we've seen so far. I'm giving you the sample of what we've seen up to this point. How about touchdowns? Let's talk touchdowns. Bailey Zappe has led 7 touchdown drives since he's taken over for Mac Jones. 7 of them. How many of those drives do you think started on the plus side of the field, which means how many of those touchdown drives, of those 7 that Zappe has had, how many of those drives do you believe started on the opposite field, right? On the plus side of the field, on the opposition side of the field? How many of those do you think began on that side of the field? Mike Pyle jumps in. He's got a guess. He says 5. Close. 3 of the 7 touchdown drives from Bailey Zappe have started on the other side of the 50-yard line. He had a touchdown drive of 11 yards. He had a touchdown drive of 29 yards. And he had a touchdown drive of 42 yards. Almost 43% of Bailey Zappe's touchdown drives have happened on the opposite side of the 50-yard line, on the plus side. We're not talking about somebody who is consistently driving 70, 75, 80 yards for touchdowns. That's not what we're seeing. So again, when you look at Zappe, 54% of his drives as QB1 have ended in a 3 and out, a turnover, or a turnover on downs. 42.8% of his touchdown drives have started on the other side of the 50-yard line. But wait, there's more. Roscoe_34 says, whoa, not good, Zappe. Hopefully these numbers are kind of eye-opening. It's not to tell you that Zappe can't sit back and win games. It's not to sit here and tell you that Zappe will never be a starting quarterback again. I hope for the great stories. That's why I watch sports. I root for guys. I root for teams, right? So maybe he ends up being a Cinderella story. Maybe he ends up shutting everybody up and proving that he's a QB1. This is just to give you the proper context, because people get wrapped up in the big plays. They get wrapped up in the sexy play to Pop Douglas. They get wrapped up in the sexy play to Mike Gesicki for the touchdown. And what they don't do is look at the totality of how somebody is actually performing. They will rip Mac Jones, and rightfully so, for the truly awful plays. But they won't give him credit for the second quarter against the Philadelphia Eagles when he was absolutely on fire. They won't give him credit for the drive against the Commanders that would have put them in field goal range if Juju could catch a football. So let's just look at it and be fair in totality. And that's what we're looking at. Mo Flora jumps in and says, when evaluating Zappe, we should try and project what might happen with a better O-line. Great job, Nick. That's, of course, part of the equation here is the offensive line and the injuries and all of that. And we absolutely include that context. Nicholas Lynn says, finally getting into the live while at work. Well, thank you, Nicholas, for watching the show while working. Okay, now here's another set of numbers that might rock your freaking world. Just forget everything that you've heard as far as narratives with Bailey Zappe. Just forget all of the hyperbole. Forget all of the Mac versus Zappe comparisons, and try to erase all of that from your mind right now, okay? 3, 2, 1, erase it. Do you know how many points per game offensively the Patriots have scored with Bailey Zappe as QB1? Without that special teams touchdown against the Denver Broncos, the Patriots have scored 14.25 points per game with Zappe as QB1 since he took over for Mac Jones. Do you know where that would rank the Patriots? That would rank the Patriots dead ass last in the NFL, behind the Giants. The Giants average 14.3 points per game. They're 31st in the league. Patriots, with Bailey Zappe as QB1, are scoring just over 14 points a game when you take out that defensive/special teams touchdown that we saw on Christmas Eve. Do you know how many points the Patriots scored with Mac Jones as your QB1? Again, it was 14.25 with Zappe so far. With Mac Jones as your starting quarterback, the Patriots offense averaged 13.45 points per game. We are talking about less than 1 point per game more offensively with Zappe than with Mac Jones. And that's with Mac Jones being completely broken. That's with Mac Jones being truly awful, hideous against Dallas and hideous against the Saints and not good against the Colts at all and not good against the Giants. At the very worst of Mac Jones, this team, through a bigger sample size, was scoring almost as many points as they've scored with Bailey Zappe as QB1. Perception is a hell of a thing, isn't it? What you think is happening might actually not be happening. Whoa. 14.25 points per game offensively with Zappe, almost 13.5 points per game with Mac. The Grizz 15 says, why are we evaluating Zappe with a full cast of real O-line and receivers, but pretending Mac would benefit from this? Look, it's rather easy to me. Again, I'm not going to get into the Mac Jones stuff. This is not Mac versus Zappe. This is just looking at Zappe and how truly much better this team has been offensively with Zappe than it was with a broken quarterback. People continue to want to talk about Mac. It's like this sickness. It really, truly is. Mac Jones has been benched. He's probably never playing again for the Patriots unless Zappe gets hurt over the next 2 weeks. This is just looking at Zappe. The offensive line has not been good. It wasn't good for Mac. It wasn't good for Zappe. The weapons are not good. They haven't been very good for Zappe. They weren't very good for Mac Jones. The running game has not been great for either quarterback. I'm just looking at Zappe, and what I'm telling you is, with a broken QB, with a guy who was playing the worst quarterback in all of football, The offense has not improved that much from that point, from that very bottom rung. It's simple. It's really simple. What we're trying to do is we're trying to look at Zappe as a starting quarterback of this football team and what kind of impact he's truly had. There's no doubt he's turned the football over a lot less. There's no doubt he's come up with some big plays by extending plays. There's no doubt about that. But when you look at the total impact, it really hasn't been much, folks. It really hasn't been much. This offense is still not good. And when we look at whether or not Zappe should be a quarterback that we can believe in 2024, this has to be part of the conversation. Has to be. The level of play is not much different. Do you see a consistent special trait from Zappe? Early on, maybe you could say his confidence, his swag. Maybe you could say his ability to manipulate the pocket. But I think we've seen other quarterbacks have that ability, and then that ability gets erased, or they try to do too much, and they fall into some trouble. More thoughts on Zappe in a minute. Like, comment, subscribe. More thumbs up means more eyeballs to the product, and that's what we need to continue to survive here with the Nick Cattle Show. More likes, more eyeballs. Don't forget to comment like the Grizz, like Mike, like others, and do not forget to click that subscribe button. And if you hit the notify, you'll get notified every time we go live. So do those three things for me. I would much appreciate it. If you're listening on Spotify, Apple Pods, rate, review, and comment. A couple of other things that, make me wonder if Zappe truly has it or not. And again, I'm not there yet. I'm not close to being there yet with Zappe, and I gave you some numbers as to why. But he's also inaccurate in the short and intermediate areas. The easy plays, so to speak, he misses on a number of those. And so he's relying on making the big play. And that's not always easy. And that's not how you are efficient. And that's why some of these efficiency analytics that you see, they tell you that Zappe is actually less efficient than Mac Jones. It's because of that. It's because of, Bailey hits the occasional big play. It's great. But from down to down, play to play, he hasn't been consistent. And that proves, through the numbers that I've shared. By the way, Amadrock, listening from Sacramento. Good show. I appreciate you, Amadrock. I remember you from the Sacramento days. Thanks for jumping in early out there on the West Coast. I appreciate all of you. And the sample size is just way too small to make any leaps. And that's why I leave the door open for Zappe to possibly be a QB1 down the road. I'm not going to completely write it off. But when you look at the sample size, let's not forget a guy like Matt Flynn. Do you remember Matt Flynn? If you don't remember Matt Flynn, he was a quarterback of the Green Bay Packers. Flynn came into a game against Detroit, January 1st, 2012. So almost 12 years ago to the day. And Matt Flynn threw for 480 yards and 6 touchdowns. And everybody was going bananas about Matt Flynn. Matt Flynn then got in 2013. After he threw the 6 touchdowns against Detroit, the next season in 2013, Matt Flynn, still backup quarterback for the Packers. He got into 6 games in 2013, which, weirdly enough, is the same amount of career starts for Zappe, right? Who's 4-2. Matt Flynn, in the 6 games that he started as the Packers quarterback, completed 62% of his passes, threw for 1,373 yards, 8 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. His quarterback rating was almost an 86. He was out of football after 2014. Out of football after 2014. 2012, guy threw 6 touchdowns against Detroit. 2013, he played pretty well. After 2014, he was erased from the league. So there are stories. Sam Howell just got benched for Jacoby Brissett. How many people, when the Patriots were playing Washington, said, "Oh, I'd love to have Sam Howell"? I'm not writing Sam Howell off. But usually what you see, Taylor Heineke, we can sit here and name a ton of these quarterbacks. What you see from guys who go up and down are that they are career backup quarterbacks if they can even stay in the league. You need consistency from beginning to end from a quarterback week in and week out before you can say that guy is the guy. Flying Elvis has his answer. No. It's pretty simple. Evan says, would a new GM and coach want to give Mac another shot if we got some O-line help and playmakers? It's one of the interesting questions of this offseason. I don't think Mac comes back. I think we're at the point now where Mac needs a reset, different place, different organization, different vibes. He might even need a full year as a backup to truly get back to, a confidence level that might open the door for him to be a starter one day. But I wouldn't completely throw it out because he's going to make less than, around $3 million next year. I wouldn't completely throw it out. But right now, if you were to ask me, I'd say Zappe has done enough to believe he can be your quarterback 2 next year. You trade Mac Jones, and then you try to find that new starter who can begin a new era. Aaron jumps in and says, Zappe got cut, couldn't beat out Jones in practice for the starting job. Please pump the brakes on Zappe, Pats fans. We need a real quarterback next year. Yes, don't forget that he was cut. Nobody wanted to pick him up. And also don't forget that back in Vegas, Malik Cunningham was activated as the QB2 ahead of Zappe. So I'm rooting for him because it's a great story. And by the way, it would be great for the Patriots if Zappe was a quarterback one because he's going to make no money next year. And then you could devote all of your resources to helping the offensive line and wide receiver and do some things. I just, from what I've seen so far, I'm not going to go there. He beat a very mediocre Pittsburgh team. He beat a Denver team that was just dead on arrival for the first 3 quarters of that game, who just benched Russell Wilson, failed to score any points against the Chargers, and had a second half that was brutal against the Chiefs. So it's just been up and down. All right. Many are concerned about the lack of spending from Robert Kraft and how that might impact this offseason. What if we told you that Kraft has to spend money this offseason? Mike Giardi wrote this at Boston Sports Journal. Based on the team's current contractual commitments, they have less than $118 million committed to next season's roster. Considering the salary cap is projected to hit somewhere around $240 million. That's a lot of cash that needs to be spent, especially considering the 90% rule. Now, salary cap wise, teams need to spend up to 90% in cash from 24 to 26. Giardi writes, to define further, cash spending is money paid out during the season, whereas cap spending includes money that has been paid but can be prorated over several years. Ipso facto, Giardi writes, if the Patriots were to get to the 90% floor for 2024, they would need to shell out almost $100 million real dollars for the upcoming season. So this is a mandate from the league, folks. You have to spend up to 90%. The Patriots, with all of the free agents coming off of the books for this offseason, along with the cap going up in the NFL, is going to force the hand of Robert Kraft. So if you're in the camp of Robert Kraft never spends money, Robert Kraft is the reason why this team hasn't done, erase all of that, because this offseason, the Patriots will have to spend money. They have to spend a bunch of money to get to that 90% number because so many guys are coming off of the books. So it doesn't matter what Kraft likes, loves, hates, whatever. It doesn't matter. Kraft has to meet this mandate from the NFL, just like every owner has to meet the mandate from the NFL. They have to spend to 90%. So if you're worried about spending, don't be worried. There's literally no excuse for not spending. They have to do it, which means the Patriots will at least have a top 9 pick, hopefully top 3 or 4. They'll have tons of money to spend, which tells me that this football operations GM job, if Belichick is gone like we expect him to be, that GM job is going to be very desirable. It's going to be very, very sexy. People around the league are going to look at that Patriots gig and say, wait a minute. I can pick the quarterback. I'm going to have all of this money to spend. And I have a great pick. Steady ownership. A fan base that loves football, that packs the stadium when the team is winning especially. I think this puts in perspective how sexy of a gig this can be. And I also think if you're Kraft and you know you have to spend this money, the last time this was the case that you had to spend the money was back in 2021. And that should be a warning because we know that Belichick swung and missed on a number of free agents during that offseason. So are you willing to give the keys to Belichick when you have to spend this much money in the offseason? Do you trust Belichick to be the guy to make those calls when he signed Jonnu Smith and Nelson Aguilar, when he went out and signed Juju Smith-Schuster and let Jacoby Myers walk? It would not spend an extra couple of million on DeAndre Hopkins. They're going to have that money to spend. Do you trust him to spend it? Thumbs up, like, comment, subscribe. All of those things mean an awful lot to this show. Spotify, Apple Pods, rate and review. Mason Daly jumps in and says, we need a quarterback. Yes, I agree. We need a quarterback. Flying Elvis again jumps in, says, NFL team GM with Belichick, catastrophic moves over the last 4 years. Any of those guys would be fired. Tough to argue. What also is interesting with all of this money that has to be spent, there have reportedly been no conversations with Mike Onwenu. There have been no conversations with Kyle Duggar. There have been no conversations with Josh Uche. So even though you've got to spend all of this money in the offseason, the guys that you have on your team right now, on this roster right now, that you would think you would like to extend or maybe even at least entertain the idea, none of those guys have really had conversations in the last several months with anybody with the Patriots front office. With this money having to be spent, extend Christian Barmore as soon as freaking possible. Barmore is extension eligible this offseason. Make a statement. Barmore is playing at an all-pro level. He has been a stud for more than 2 months. He has been one of the best interior defensive linemen in football. That is a guy that you pay. Make a statement. Pay one of your players. Get it done. Pay one of the guys that you drafted, that you developed, that is becoming a stud in front of your eyes. Pay Barmore this offseason. Give him the extension. Derek says, go quarterback with the top pick. And yes, if you're watching on Twitter/X, we can now pull your comments up on the stream, which is awesome. Thank you, Derek, for watching and for commenting. No matter how much money you have to spend, don't forget, it's about 3 things to me this offseason. It's about allocation of resources. It's not how much money you have to spend. It's also how you spend that money. Be aggressive. Don't sit around. Don't wait for other teams. Don't sit back and say, oh, see if you can get something better. If you want to keep Kyle Duggar, then you pay Kyle Duggar. If you want to keep Michael Onwenu, then you pay him the money. Don't let him walk out the door and go get a better deal. Be aggressive. Show some urgency. Show some urgency to this offseason because you need it. At best, you can win 6 games this year. You need a reset offensively. Be aggressive, be urgent, and be smart with the allocation. Some big decisions coming up this offseason. All right, quick couple minutes on the Bruins. Bruins win at Buffalo last night 4-1. There were just tons of whistles. Whistle happy from the crew. 11 penalties were called. The Bruins had 6. Sabres had 5. And really the story of the game as you watched it, it was special teams, 6 for 6 on the penalty kill. They had to kill off the Marchand penalty and the unsportsmanlike conduct, which I didn't like either of those calls, but they had to kill off that 4-minute power play. There was a forever long power play late in the second period they killed off. On their own power play, Bruins went 3 for 4, and the only miss was at the end of the game when they weren't truly trying to score there. And when you look at this, Charlie Coyle, 2 goals. Morgan Geekie scored a goal. He's been tremendous. Geekie has been tremendous for at least the last few weeks. Lowry had a nice goal, aggressive to the net early on in this game. But the issue remains. Wings, secondary scoring. Secondary scoring for this Bruins team is a weakness. We all see it. They had 1 5-on-5 goal last night. They have 64 5-on-5 goals this year. It's not enough. You can't just live off of the power play. You can't do it. Because of this offense, because of the lack of secondary scoring, you're also lacking possession time in your own zone. Limited offensive zone time puts pressure on the defense. Defense gets leaky. The goaltenders, who were terrific when they're not getting a barrage of shots at them every 5 seconds, they start to play less effectively because of that. So you're hurting your strength. So they have to get that secondary scoring going from the wings. DeBrusk had 2 assists last night. Hopefully that gets him going. 13 points in 32 games. It's not going to do it. Do you know that DeBrusk, 3 of his 4 goals happened in like 1 week in November. 3 of his 4 goals this year happened in like an 8 or 9 day span in November. DeBrusk needs to be better, especially the way this team is built. Now, Zappe last night to the wing, Geeky, Frederick at center. Maybe when Patra returns, you can move Geeky to the wing permanently. You don't have a first-round pick coming up this year because of the Bertuzzi trade, so you need to find ways. Maybe Georgi Merkulov from Providence is the answer. He's had a dynamite scoring season. Maybe you bring him up for a spark, but they need better secondary scoring. All right, let's jump in here quickly. Paul Ratnage says, hi, Nick, watching in England. Love it when people comment from other countries. I love it. Watching from England, do you think that the quarterbacks have missed having a veteran quarterback for advice and knowledge to help and fall back on? Pats fan since 1982. Look, I think a veteran could help in spots with confidence and all of that, but this was really an offensive line issue, Paul. It was a lack of wide receiver talent issue. You have a quarterback that, is not supremely athletic. He doesn't have any truly special trait. And you start the season with somebody who's, going to be a pocket passing quarterback, and you give him an offensive line who is incredibly leaky. You give him weapons that can't get open quick enough. You get a run game that's in trouble because of all of that. It was just a mess. It was just a mess. All right, so that'll do it on this Thursday. I appreciate every single one of you for joining me. Hopefully you enjoyed the numbers regarding Bailey Zappe, and it gives you some really good context to work with. You learned that Robert Kraft has to spend this offseason, which is a good thing for the Patriots, and we slid in some Bs. We'll be back tomorrow. Of course, it's a Football Friday, 11 a.m. sharp here on YouTube. We will preview the Bills game, and we'll have a lot more than that. Until then, though, enjoy yourself. Have fun. Be safe. It is the Nick Cattle Show.